Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Self University podcast. I'm your host, Danny Morley. We've also got in the house
Alejandro,
William Thiem,
Roger Schultz.
And today we're going to be covering the topic of what programs we inherited from the masculine. And this came up recently today in my, this past week for me, because I really started digging into what exactly programs did my father give me, because I was seeing a severe lack of responsibility that I kept on making the same mistakes over and over again. And I was like, there's got to be a deeper reason. And it was kind of frustrating. So eventually when I felt the frustration, there was the trigger for me to go deeper into, okay, what energy is living behind this that's causing all these repetitive patterns and mistakes that I was making. And as I went into these wounds, as I dove deeper, I found that when my parents split, my dad, he just treated me. I grew up with him and he treated me like an adult. And I loved that as a child. It was awesome. I got a lot of privileges that other kids didn't. You know, I could go out longer. There was no parent keeping track of me. But it meant at around 7 years old, I had to suppress my child self and just grow up. And so there was a big part of my development as a child where I didn't have it. I didn't learn in the same way that other kids learn. I didn't have this guide that I was looking up to. And that is really what has blueprinted the way I show up a lot of the time. And I don't particularly want to be like that anymore. So now is going to be a process of me going back and maturing this inner child, this 7-year-old that deeply wants guidance and gets so frustrated when he keeps making the same mistakes and doesn't know what to do. And so this is what I inherited. This is one of the many programs that I inherited. And for me, one of the big traits of masculinity is like leadership. You know, I want a father figure to lead me in the right direction when I'm still learning and growing. And so this is one of the common things that I've seen in my life, in the way that I've inherited this program of lack of responsibility. And it's ironic that it's the first way of oneness in Rachel's book, because it's like, well, I can't start at any of the other ones. I've got to start right at the beginning and become more responsible. And that's what I see a lack of in my childhood, was this this masculine responsibility that I didn't take hold of. And now I have this energy living within me that just gets angry and frustrated when things don't go his way, or I continuously make mistakes. So who would like to share next about their experience with their father?
I guess I'll jump in. Danny, thank you very much for sharing. And then just first and foremost, I just want to really appreciate the three of you gentlemen, just us in this space, really just looking to bring some awareness around, these things, these experiences that we've had growing up, and kind of our journeys from there. So I just wanted to honor that. But my father was actually, murdered when I was about 18 months old. So I really didn't, grow up with a physical representation of my dad. There was a lot of vapors, a lot of off gas from who he was and how he showed up with my mom. But, he was a rebel. He was a greaser, kind of guy, mechanic, definitely thwarted authority, did not like authority at all. And he displayed a lot of those traditional, toxic masculine, wounded masculine traits from what I've learned from my mother over the years, and what I've experienced in different, kind of ceremonial aspects and communication with him and spending time with him in that space. But he was a philanderer, a lot of infidelity, lack of responsibility. He wanted a family so bad, but at the same time, he didn't know how to respond in the face of adversity with any one of my two older brothers. It was always fun. There was no real structure from what I understand. So there was just, he had to be the big man on campus. He had to be the center of attention, all eyes on him at all times. So there was a lot of that came into my awareness as I grew up, and that led into, this need for attention, this need for recognition, this like need to be number one amongst the group of my friends, right? So how do I do that? That's the way Rachel talks about, the way of truth. I was not truthful. I had to lie. I misrepresented. I was deceitful in and around how to be more grandiose. I remember a birthmark on my ear, and I remember growing up that my friends would ask me, "How'd you get this birthmark?" And I just sit there and come up with these stories about fighting tigers. And as crazy as that may sound, like that just was a snowball, like a small microcosm of a lot of these different behaviors that I inherited from my father, from an energetic perspective. So I'm looking forward to kind of unpacking this a little bit more with you guys and going from there. So that's a little bit about, some of the things that, I got to unpack and unwind and packages I got to open up as this journey kind of unfolded.
Thank you, Roger. For myself, my first experience, my first childhood memory with my father was when I was about 3 years old. And my mother was in the living room. She was having coffee with a friend, a male friend, and I'm just playing with my toys. And my father arrives to the home. The friend that was in the home, he panics and he runs out the back door. My dad runs in, chasing him, and he can't find him. Goes to the front where his car is parked, opens up his trunk, pulls out this baseball bat, and he starts beating the shit out of the car that was parked out front. It was the friend who was with my mother. So that was my first childhood memory of my father, like the aggression, the anger, and also just experiencing at such a young age that my mother was also cheating on my father because he was cheating on her and he had been cheating on her for years. So that was already the first imprint that I had since I was a little child. So that was a wound that I carried for myself for many years, the fear of being abandoned. Like first for my little 3-year-old brain, my interpretation of my father leaving was because it was my fault. So that was already the first impact that I had with the masculine. And then I still, once my father and my mother separated, I would still see my father once a week. And my father's, the way he showed up was with just working 6 days a week, 12-hour days, and he would get to hang out with us once a week for a couple hours. Just very emotionally disconnected and just work, get money. And that's pretty much what I started to do myself when I became a younger adult. Just work as hard as I can, get money, and that's what's going to make me a successful man.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Alejandro. Yeah, for me, my parents split when I was fairly young. I was about 6 or 7, and I lived with my dad, and he was a drug addict. And so a lot of my childhood between 7 to about the age of 11, when I lived with my father, he just wasn't around. He would leave money on the table for me to get groceries. And, one of the earlier memories I have of him was just waking up one morning with him in my bed. And that was such a big deal to me at that time. And when I was 15, he committed suicide. So for me, a lot of the wounds that I inherited from him were, abandonment, acceptance of myself, because not seeing my father around in my life, not feeling like he's accepting me for who I am and modeling to me what it means to be a man. How the misconception of vulnerability equals weakness. So not showing emotion, showing my emotion equals weakness. And so from there, learning to suppress everything that I'm feeling.
Beautiful. Well, it's really cool to hear everyone's stories, because everyone seems like there's some common trends, but very vastly different. And one thing I just want to bring up to anyone listening that's kind of not familiar with this work is that in this podcast and all the time in the work that we do at MSU, we're never pointing blame. We're never trying to say, oh, it's your fault that I'm like this. What we're saying is, right, in this discussion is, this is the truth of what happened. And this is what the energy was created in me. And it's not about casting judgment or saying this was wrong, like what you did was wrong or what you did was right. It's just about simply addressing what is the truth. And then as children, how did we feel at the time? Because, I mean, both William and Roger, like, you both lost your parents. That's an incredibly big wound. But you also don't have to have the physical loss of a parent to still have an extremely traumatic childhood if you're not able to process what you're feeling. And this is where people that aren't on the path of doing this work might not fully understand. So I just want to fully explain this, that trauma isn't exactly it can be the big traumatic event as both of you guys went through of losing a parent. I can't imagine how difficult that was. But it can also be a smaller event when you were younger, where you felt like you lost your parent. They might have been walking around the corner. They might have been just leaving you for a couple of days and going on a vacation, and you didn't quite fully understand. But in your mind, you're experiencing, oh my God, I've lost my father. And that trauma can be enough to stay in with you and replay a pattern of abandonment your entire life. So I just want to make that clear for everyone listening. But wow, amazing shares, guys. We'll start with Roger, because you kind of went first. How did this rebellious authority or lack of authority, how did that go from being in your, what you are seeing, you're downloading this as a program, and how did that come out into your life?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's a great question, Danny. It really manifested, just as a young kid, first and foremost, with just my mom, just constantly going. It was just this constant fight, I had two older brothers. I'm the youngest of three, so it's a constant fight for attention, a constant fight for, the nurture. Now my mom's got to wear both hats. She's got to wear, the mother and father hat, the masculine and feminine hat. She's got to go provide, and she has to nurture, and so that balance there is completely out of whack. We're not taught how to create boundaries. We're not taught how to, set time aside to nurture, love, and provide those different types of things, at times. This is one of the best parts about this program, is being able to learn how to set divine boundaries, how to honor those boundaries, how to, create that space in a relationship for yourself and for your loved ones. But yeah, I mean, it went to, oh man, I was a thief, constant interactions with law enforcement as a young kid. I always knew better. There was never a moment that, a police officer would talk to me about stealing something, and I'd come up with some sob story or some emotional manipulation or something to that effect to get out of or reduce whatever punishment was coming my way. Just a lot of different things with, and I think probably one of the biggest things that kind of touches on that is, selling a lot of drugs. I had to solve things with money. I had to solve things with gifts. I had to solve things with materialism. Savior complexes that came into that. So being involved in that world for a very long time, illustrated a lot of wounds. It illustrated a lot of, my relationship with authority. And where it came back to, Danny, is the ultimate authority is me. And when I say that, I mean like coming back home to me, my authority, my relationship with myself. And so that was one of the biggest kind of revelations for me was, coming back to myself, coming back home. But yeah, there was just a lot of criminal acts, a lot of disobedience. I mean, just, you name it, and I probably did it. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit about, how that kind of manifested from an authoritative perspective.
And how did you work on healing that?
The only way I knew how, and that was through pain. My learning modality growing up was physical pain. I remember going up to my elementary school. My father was a cinder block wall that I would throw my baseballs against. So when I would want to go play catch or have a relationship with my dad, subconsciously, energetically, I would throw a baseball against the wall, and that cinder block wall was my dad, so to speak. And I remember so many times, like, I would start off with just a slow toss and get to the point where I was just in such a rage and such an anger, I would just go up and punch the wall until my hands bled. Just so much physical pain when I played football. I played through dislocated shoulders. I played through torn knees. I played through, a ton of different injuries. And that's how I learned was physical pain. So getting to the state of like healing it, I had to look, that journey started with pain. My beloved, went on the journey with grandmother. And I threw out, I was going to divorce her. I was going to leave her. I was going to abandon her, so to speak. And she looked at me and she said, okay, if that's what you choose to do, then that's what you choose to do. The call for her was so strong. And I just got showered in that moment with divine feminine energy. And that was such a profound moment for me. And again, it wasn't, like a light switch, so to speak, but that kind of moved me in the direction of, plant medicine and other different modalities. But it was a very, very physically painful process that I had to go through. And that was a program for me from my father. And through this whole journey was learning through physical pain. And I finally got to a point where I was like, fuck, there's got to be a better way than twisting and contorting and being in so much pain. And so this moving into more of a gentleness, a harmlessness and gentleness around this journey to where I'm at today. So that's just, how that all kind of evolved in a nutshell.
I can imagine doing the work that we do at MSU. One of the things that Rachel teaches, and I can still hear her voice all the time, is get into the pain, go into the pain, right? And I remember there was this like month 3, month 4, there was this like one class we had, and it was like a switch had been flipped, and it was like, okay, no more, fooling around with this love and light stuff. We're going into the pain. We're going into the darkness. We're going in. And every time she would come off mute as we were practicing coaching, she would be like, into the pain, more into the pain, take him into the pain. And it was a good lesson. And I feel like some of that ability to direct your energy into the pain is that the masculine stability of going, okay, we're strong enough to do this. Let's go in, and then allowing the sacred and divine feminine to open and do the work. But do you find that all those years of you using pain to kind of work through or feel some of the trauma that you were experiencing, do you think that relationship that you built with pain actually helped you in the container as a coach?
Absolutely. Looking back on and reflecting, those were just all learning lessons. Those are just lessons for me to find gratitude and peace in, saying, you know what, I can experience all this physical pain and get to this point of courage, of taking, you know, one of the characteristics of sacred masses is taking risks. You know, so being able to take a risk in and around experiencing not the physical side of the equation, but the emotional side of the equation. Like crossing that bridge, which I had no connection to. I didn't, like, the only thing I knew my heart was a muscle that pumped blood, and I needed to make it stronger to be better at sports. Now it's this magical powerhouse of healing, nurturing, you know, divine energy. And now navigating, like, oh, I can experience physical pain. Now just transition to emotional and begin to, you know, unwind that relationship and connect to that relationship deeper, stronger, and more in a more wholesome manner.
Amazing. Alejandro, how about your experience with this aggression that you experienced when you were a child? Like, how did that manifest into you? How did you take that in as a program? And then how was that translated into what you've seen in yourself as an adult?
I feel like in my younger years, I would suppress a lot of my anger. So I would do everything in my power to not be like my father, to not be aggressive. So I was a lot more passive growing up in my younger years. And then after being taught and modeled by everyone in my family, all the men in my family, society as well, coming from a Mexican background, the machismo, as far as showing emotion and how weak that is, that was something that I was just not allowed to do. So after years of just bottling everything up and keeping everything suppressed, inevitably for me, I would utilize video games to release all of that anger that I had, and I would bully people online and ridicule and make fun of others online. So the modern day keyboard warrior behind the YouTube videos, that was me. That was me in my teenage years, you know, just lashing out on people online behind a screen. So that's how the aggression aspect kind of came out for me in my early years. And yeah, that's in regards to aggression. Did you have another question?
Yeah, you can go into, you also said earlier that you kind of felt it was your fault, that when you know, you were experiencing your father beating up the car and there was you know, your mother was cheating and whatnot, that you internalized it as, oh, this is something that I've done wrong. Is that what you meant by that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go into
Yeah.
that wound, because that's huge.
Yeah, I feel like when that experience happened and my father was now moving out of the house, I know now because my mother and father have told me that when that happened, I would grab onto my father's leg, begging him not to leave. Like, why are you leaving? It just doesn't make any sense. And my father would tell me, now, son, I got to go. But no, I would refuse. I would grab him by the leg. I would punch him and kick him. Like, no, don't leave. And so that manifested for me where I always had this fear of being abandoned by all the people in my life, especially men. And I feel like even prior to joining like MSU, this would show up in the smallest things in my life. For example, me and Danny are friends, and I send Danny a text and he doesn't get back to me in a couple hours. Who knows what he's up to? I would immediately run this program of like, oh shit, no, Danny does not want to reply to my text. He's mad at me. He's upset at me. He's going to leave me. He's going to abandon this friendship. So it would show up in so many areas of my life.
I still remember at the beginning of the program, I think I had a call with Rob, and I found out that like you, Alejandro, and Rob had a call together, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm being excluded from the masculine, and like it was, you know, all this programming. So I know exactly what you mean, and it was, for me, I never got that way around like the friends that I have, which are women, but it was just men, and I had this massive mistrust with the masculine, and for me, it came down to this. I go back to like this leadership thing. Like I was expecting as a child my dad to guide me and him to show up as this leader in my life, and I felt like that I didn't receive that fully, and so then I didn't trust the masculine, and then also had, you know, this part of me that was a lot more fluid with my sexuality, and having to suppress that made me feel less like I could be honest with my masculine. So there was a lot of things there that was causing for me this like complete mistrust in masculine, and it made me become a lot more in tune with like my feminine side, which now I see as in some regards like a good advantage, because it made me very in touch with my emotion. And that was something that my dad really modeled. Although he was a very disengaged parent, he was in himself, like when we were watching movies, he would, you know, he'd be very into his emotions, and that taught me to be very in touch with my emotions. So I'm very different to most men out there, where they have this extreme wound of like disconnecting. I know, Roger, you said you didn't really feel anything till like the last couple of years, which is, I can't imagine being like that, because my experience with life is the over feeling, is feeling too much and not understanding what to do with them. But the how did you work on healing this, the things you saw as you were a child, Alejandro, and this my fault? How have you worked on that in the last few years to really become at peace with it and bring love to it?
I think the big part was doing this work with MSU and going in, like you said, going into the pain of those times where I felt abandoned by my father. And it wasn't just that time when I was 3 years old, but it happened many times afterwards in my childhood, when he would disapprove of me or he'd be disappointed with my grades. And I would immediately like feel this sense of just being rejected, of not being wanted. So for me, it was going into the pain of those experiences and validating, you know, that little boy that just wanted his father's validation, wanted his father's love, wanted good job, son. You know, that's all he wanted. So going back into those experiences, validating that young boy's pain and loving it. So that played a huge role. And then also, prior to joining MSU, I started to involve myself a lot in men's work. So I was involved heavily in a couple other organizations out there, the Rising Man Movement, Sacred Sons, Modern Renaissance Man. These are all amazing containers for men where you get to experience vulnerability and compassion, and everyone is like on a level playing field. There isn't that competition that I always grew up around with the toxic masculinity and in my own friendship. So for me, the men's work, being around conscious, loving, heart-centered men, along with MSU, has dramatically shifted my life. And now I feel like I really love and appreciate just men in general. You know, whenever I'm walking around the park and I see a man who's, you know, maybe having trouble making eye contact with me, like I can feel him. Like I know what that's like. He's afraid, he's shy. And so I now make my best efforts to try to connect with all men, because I've been there myself.
Amazing. All right, William. Let's go into some of your story. Like, you've already expressed about how you lost your father, and I can't imagine like And you, Roger. I really can't imagine what it's like to lose a parent, and I'm really not looking forward to that day. So what was it like to have to grow up with, this father who is a drug addict, and then you said that, he wasn't around, and then he really wasn't around?
Yeah, well, when I was younger, I did live solely with my father, and my mother essentially abandoned me. And so during that period of time, my outlet was aggression as well. I remember going to school and bringing a lacrosse glove to school, and with the intention of just hitting some of the boys. And that was really how I expressed my emotion. That was my outlet at the time. And when I was around 11, I actually moved in with my mother. And from that point in time, from 11 to 15, I didn't see my father. I didn't see him. And it was really difficult. I really learned how to suppress and repress my emotion at that time. So everything that I was feeling, I disconnected from myself, and I really just internalized everything, and started to seek seclusion, started to not want to connect or know how to connect with people, and started really forming some toxic beliefs in myself. A lack of trust, not knowing to trust, not feeling like I can trust myself, and not feeling like I can accept myself, because I didn't feel the acceptance from my father. I didn't feel like he wanted to see me because he wasn't around when I was younger.
I resonate so much with that. My dad, we get him from work and it was straight to the pub, have a few pints with his mates. And I remember like being a kid when my parents were still together, and just having that feeling like, Dad, you don't want to hang out with me. And he did occasionally. But when we're kids, we're sensitive little beings. Even if we're not, they're not actively saying, oh, I don't want, I'm busy right now. We can feel when our parents are there or not. And we might not be in tune with that now. I think all of us in this circle are, as we can connect back to the energy of our childhood. And I wasn't aware of this at all. I thought, my dad, did a great job. And then, I mean, he did the best that he could, completely did the best that he could. But only recently, I've been doing this work now for 10 months, have I started to really dig in and find, oh, I've got huge wounds from my father, of him being disengaged and disconnected. And that's what I really see in my life right now. I'm really working on it hard with my partner. I often, when it gets kind of intense, or if I don't feel a lot of love, I learn to disconnect. And I know for me, that was like this program that I learned when I was a kid, where it was like, well, I don't feel any love. I don't feel like this is worth anything. So instead of me just being in love, I'm just going to disconnect, because that's easier than feeling the pain of whatever I'm experiencing right now. And so how did that past hurt? How did that show up in your life, like right now? I know you mentioned like you went through this period of seclusion as like a teenager. Was that as a teen, William?
It was early teens. Yeah. So I would say early teens, but I chose to walk away from my family at the age of 17. And there was just a lot of pain, and I had no way of knowing how to outlet it. That was never modeled to me. How do I release my pain? How do I accept my emotion? And so at an early age, I turned to alcohol and drugs. And I really just embraced the feeling of that I had, the freedom that I felt from being in an altered state. And so from there, I eventually actually got sick of that type of lifestyle, and I gravitated to another extreme, which was work. And I learned to place my value on what I created through working. And I learned to pay for love from women. So through my work, I became very dedicated. I would work 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week for years. And I would go through stages of working constantly and then into burnout. And then when I would go into a burnout, I would actually restart the program of drinking. And I would stop working for a period of time. I would drink and party and use drugs. And then I would go back into working.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's been some big shares, and thanks for being vulnerable. It's not easy to talk about. If anyone's listening, like I can tell you right now, like getting vulnerable and putting yourself out here to the world, talking about this level of depth, you know, owning up to the fact that you're using money to, you know, pay for love, and go into the depths of drug use and alcohol. It's not easy. So just honor you so much, man. And how have you worked on healing those wounds, and have you seen a change in the programs that show up in your life now?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is acceptance, right? Accepting that those were my wounds and the awareness of what I was doing, right? Because a lot of it, you know, I was unaware that I was using money to buy love, for example, right? That was all that I knew. I didn't feel like I was worthy of receiving love from somebody else because I didn't feel like I received it from my parents. And so I felt like I needed to, get it through money, through working, through money. And so once I became aware of that, you know, then it came to learning to trust myself. And that's really what I'm working with the most right now, is trusting in my ability to feel emotion, trusting that what I'm feeling is validated and I'm okay to feel that. And then modeling that for my children.
Beautiful. Let's go into what exactly we believe toxic masculinity is. I know we spoke about this before the podcast. Does anyone want to start us off?
I feel like the term of toxic masculinity really just stems from the extension of the boy who never matured, and all the experiences and all the pain and all the male role models that boy had, and he's still living from those programs that were created from when he grew up.
Yeah, I feel like we only have to look at Hollywood to see toxic masculinity. It's represented by, you know, the superhero who feels no emotion, uses strength and force to achieve everything that they want. And you know, another example is how we treat the earth, how we rape and pillage the planet. And you know, that's just a representation of the toxic masculinity.
Yeah, so true. I always, you know, see the current condition of the earth and just, this is where we're at. Like you see all the way there's garbage everywhere, especially when you go to different countries, you know, and it's crazy to just see the amount of trash that's just lying around, and the way that we just pull, and we're just take from Mother Earth. And you know, there's a lot of people that are trying to give back, but for the most part, monocrop agriculture, factory farming of animals and plants, where it's just pull. And that image, what we see on the outside, is a reflection of how we you know, what we're going through on the inside, that disconnection that we have from source, from the universe, from nature, that is seen in the external world. And definitely, yeah, I would agree, it's part of the toxic masculine that we see. Yeah. Roger, how about you? What's your experience?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would echo all three of your comments and thoughts on that. You know, going through this journey and learning the connectedness that we have with source, the connectedness we have with consciousness, a collective consciousness, how we all came from nature. You know, we share consciousness with plant, we share consciousness with animals. And when we, you know, this was something actually that kind of came when we were down in San Diego, Danny. You know, just being out on the beach, just being out in nature and experiencing that. You know, when we take, you know, we unpack, we're from nature, like we are created from nature. And when we take from nature, we are just taking and robbing from ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
100%.
so to really like begin the process, we have to really learn how to authentically give. And when we learn to authentically give from a wholesome divine place, then we can really start to unwind a lot of these patterns and programs. Become much more aware of our surroundings, much more aware of the impact of our words, how they're delivered, the tone, you know, much more aware of prioritizing, you know, time with our family, you know, time with ourselves, time with our loved ones. You know, I think a lot of men, and this is me included, back in my wounded states, was to spend time with my beloved Adrian. Like a date had to be grandiose for it to matter. Like I've got to do all these things. I've got a plan. I've got to do, like, all she wanted was 10, 15 minutes to be seen, to be heard, to listen, to talk, to express emotions, to be vulnerable. All she wanted from me was the ability to express a vulnerable state versus go, 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 money, 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 1 zeros, 1 zeros, 1 zeros. You know, like I did not provide a safe and secure space for her to express her femininity.
Mm.
You know, so learning how to authentically give, and to take no more than what we need, like what we require to subsist on this planet. You know, and that's like I fell into the consumerism, like the materialism. Like I had to have these things. I had to have the nice car. I had to have all. It's like shit doesn't come with you when you die.
No, it doesn't.
You know, and at the end of the day, as fathers, like we go and we create life, and we're unbelievable. Like I still remember the day my son was born, and how excited I was to be a father, and then I subconsciously started to abandon that gratitude, abandon the joy, and abandon the responsibility of fatherhood.
Mm. Yeah, that's really what I saw in my childhood, was like this. My dad wanted to be a dad, but he didn't want any of the responsibility that came with it. And like he really loves me as a son. I know that for sure. But in terms of actually doing all of the work that it requires to raise a child, which is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, he wanted, you know, he wanted to still be able to live his life. And really, when you have a child, you know, your life, you've got to kind of put in the back seat and put theirs at the front. That's what I've seen in terms of like the toxic side, was like this this lack of responsibility. And I know I've mentioned it earlier in this podcast, but it's because it's what I'm really working through right now. And, you know, this is the beauty of a wound. Whenever you have a wound, you really get to know the depths of what it actually means to heal from this and what it actually means to. So now I'm really going into, well, what does it mean to be a responsible masculine man? And what would it be like to be? And now I have to be a mystical parent to my own inner child. The beautiful part is I don't have to have a child to learn these lessons. I just have to go back into the energy of myself and help raise this 7-year-old so he's emotionally mature enough to fully integrate into my being, so that I get to live from a place of freedom and elevation instead of.
That's beautiful, Danny.
Yeah, instead
Beautiful
of
awareness, man.
Yeah, because what happens when we get triggered, just for anyone listening, I know you three know this, but energetically, we're going back in time. So as soon as we're triggered and our wounds are activated, for me, that like I'm getting frustrated because I've got no like leadership, or like I'm doing something wrong and no one's telling me that I'm doing it wrong and I'm just making mistakes. I get frustrated, and in that moment of frustration, energetically, I am 7 years old. I'm not 29 years old anymore. I am 7, showing up in 2022 as a 7-year-old in a nearly 30-year-old's body. And so my behavior then reflects the 7-year-old, getting frustrated, throwing tantrums, making mistakes, not learning. And that's how these wounds work, is once they're activated, we go back in time energetically, not physically, but on an energetic level, we are back in time where that 7-year-old or the 15-year-old or the 12-year-old or whatever the age is, and then we're being activated from that place. Alejandro, I know before this you mentioned a gentleman that was like a prime example of what we see as the toxic masculine. And you sent a video out, and I watched a few last night, and I was kind of shocked at what I was seeing. This gentleman called Andrew Tate was going off about the roles of women in society. And this is actually what I've seen in my life. So my mom was the primary child raiser, and my dad was the income. And so when my parents separated, then my dad didn't really know exactly what to do, because his role was, oh, I just make the money and she takes care of the kids. That's the roles. And this is exactly what this gentleman, Andrew Tate, was talking about. And where we are now, I think, as a society and a civilization, is we're trying to elevate beyond that. We're trying to say, man, woman, you can take any role. We're going to have strengths in one. We're going to have weaknesses in certain places. But to be masculine, you can still do the dishes and be masculine.
You still load. I mean, you still put some laundry in the washing machine and still be masculine.
You can look after the kids.
You sure can.
You can take the kids to the park and play with them, and that's still masculine.
You can have a cup of tea with your daughter and dance around in some tutus and still be masculine.
I love a good tutu.
And this is recognizing what divine masculine is, right? The ability to step into that vulnerability and to learn how to nourish and support our children. Do the dishes, do the laundry if it needs to be done, and recognize like that is divine masculine.
And do these things from an authentic, genuine perspective, right? We're not doing these things to achieve a goal. I'm not energetically going and doing laundry or doing dishes to achieve a thank you or achieve appreciation. We are just doing it out of love, for ourselves. And that if we do receive a thank you, that's just, as my wife says, sprinkles on a donut. The donut by itself is amazing. Right? Buttery, crispy, super good, warm if you get it out of the oven. And then if you get like a little bit of thank you, appreciation, pat on the back, it's like, hey, there's some sprinkles on the donut. So doing those things authentically, unconditionally is amazing. So.
Alejandro, do you want to share a little about, because I know you're the one that saw this gentleman, exactly what you've seen and how that's played out in your life.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Andrew Tate is just an archetype of a man that we've seen in Hollywood many times before. I know for myself in middle school, the movie Scarface was extremely popular, and everyone would wear like the Scarface t-shirt of Al Pacino. And his biggest phrases was, first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the women. And that was like something that we all strive to achieve one day, at least from the circle of friends that I was around. So I feel like Andrew Tate is just a modern day playing into that archetype. But really, you can see the wounds that Andrew also has with himself, and he's acting out of this insecurities that he has. So you can see the programs that he's running the control, right? Wanting control, wanting to have power over women. I know for myself, when I was in my early 20s, I feel like Andrew Tate's message would have resonated and landed with me, because there's this successful, good-looking person who has all the things that I want, and he's now speaking about how difficult it is for men to get attention and for men to get validation. So I now feel seen and heard by someone that I look up to. So whatever he says, I'm going to follow. And I think that's what we're seeing today with a lot of the people who admire him and support the message that he's sharing with the world.
Yeah, he makes a really interesting point that a woman goes into a nightclub, and no matter how attractive she is, she's going to get attention. And a man goes into a nightclub, and it's not quite the same. He's probably going to spend the whole night trying to pluck up the courage to talk to a pretty woman, walk up to her, get rejected, and probably drink himself to the floor. And one of the interesting things about that is, where I too am the same as you, Alejandro. Like, these messages would have resonated with me when I was younger, for sure. And what I'd say now is, why do you need to talk to the woman? What part of you is so disconnected from your own divinity that you feel the need that the only way for you to be masculine and whole is to get the bitches, is to go and have all these women, to be able to strike up a conversation and have women pouring to you? Which part of you actually needs love? And how were you modeled this from your father and from your own society, the cultural conditioning that we received, to make you believe that this is what masculinity is? And being able to divorce yourself from these toxic traits and really tap into the truth of who you are. And then you'll find you don't need to talk to anybody, because you're very happy with exactly who you are. You don't feel the need to be worthy by the amount of women you've slept with or the amount of women that follow you. And the irony is, if you do this work, you'll find that women will naturally be more drawn to you. So it's a paradox. And if any man is out there and wondering, like, why can't I get any women? Well, become more deeply connected to yourself, become more deeply connected to your divine masculine attributes, and you will notice that you no longer need a woman, and then that will flow to you just naturally. It all comes down to the work. And there's a reason why this institution that we all work for is called Masters of Self. It's called Masters of Self for a reason, because if you want good things to flow to you in your life, if you want to live a life of abundance, of love, of peace, of joy, of bliss, you have to first master yourself. And trying to achieve it externally and think, oh, the cure to my problems is to get all the bitches and have all the money. And you'll find very quickly that is a very shallow pool that you're going to go swimming in, and that life is a deep ocean of love and abundance. And so turn inwards and do the work to yourself, and that is really where you're going to learn to thrive. Before we wrap this up, I'd like to go through what we have understood in our lives right now. What is divine masculine?
Vulnerability.
Agreed.
I mean, to kind of your point, Danny, like taking risks, taking authentic, genuine risks, look into like a risk of walking deeper into the ocean from that shallow end, taking risks in personal development, taking risks in, not going to the club, putting a boundary on that, seeing how like your friends may respond to that, but like, courage and risk and bravery done in a authentic wholesome way, to me is a part of that divine masculine puzzle.
I feel like in order for one to access the divine masculine, one also has to be connected to their divine feminine. And I know for myself, um, feeling emotions other than anger and pride were completely not completely not allowed. But as we know in doing this work, in order for us to actually heal, we need to access that divine feminine energy of compassion, of love, of grace. So I feel that with the combining of the two energies, then one can actually access the divine masculine of structure, responsibility, discipline, courage. But it's only with accessing our divine feminine as well.
Yeah, of course.
That can be pretty scary.
Yeah, because it's a very big ocean.
It's a big ocean. It's a vast ocean.
Yeah, very big. And for me, it's all about this like stability, the strength and stability that we can provide for the divine feminine to really operate and just be that. I know, Roger, you've used this term in the past, but be the anchor. And I think that's such a good analogy that you used in the previous podcast. I mean, if you've not listened to that one, Roger goes a lot into his story with toxic masculinity and this very similar things that we're talking about today. I'd highly recommend going and listening, and just being the anchor to the divine feminine, for her to just sail, flow, and just be expansive in all the amazing, beautiful, sacred, divine ways that she is. So thank you everyone for listening, guys. I'm so honored to spend this hour with you. It's been a real treat. I appreciate all of your vulnerability. I know I've said this before, it's not easy. And I look forward to doing this again with you guys soon. So see you guys. Like, rate, subscribe, do all the good things if you've enjoyed it. If you want to work with any of these amazing coaches I have before me, check out mastersofselfuniversity.com. They're all on Instagram. They're all on, I think everyone's on TikTok. I'm not too sure these days. But they're all on the website that's playing below. So come join us if any of this resonates, and thank you so much for your time. Bye.
Much love, everyone.
Take care, everybody.